It's 20 years to the day, of course.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to wonder where that time has gone. But there's no doubt that that was the most famous game in Vauxhall Football Club's 60-year history. And a great 2 games it turned out to be. But I was the chairman of the club. And I'd been for some years, before that a manager, but chairman of the club at that particular time. And I think the thing that made it very special on the day was, on the first day, which was played in Chester City's ground, saw us involve the community. We had coaches and buses leaving from here, all the memorabilia and the hats, all the Vauxhall flags and Vauxhall scarves flying, absolutely fantastic. And to see over 4,000 supporters at Chester City was a sight to behold, to be quite honest with you. And the thing that made that day special was the fact that Vauxhalls weren't overawed. We were a good team anyway. But in the very, very last kick of the game, Nicky Young, the centre forward, had a completely, totally open goal and could have side-footed in, but unfortunately the ball rolled under his foot, or we would have won it literally in the final 5 seconds of the first game at Sealand Road. Well, I'd like to say that it helped more than the finances it brought in, but I'd be lying, to be honest with you, because, you know, we obviously got an awful lot of publicity, not only for ourselves as a football club, but for Vauxhall Motors, because we had 1 or 2 players that actually worked in the plant. And the manager at the time, Albert MacDonald, was well known, and of course gave him some decent publicity as well. There's no doubt that the team that we had was, it was a conference standard team. You know, we had ex-young pros that just didn't quite make it, in Nicky Young and Danny Collins and others. Phil Brazier, who of course had played in Liverpool youth teams with some great stars. So it was just a very strong team, and they were never overawed. They always played well. And he had the likes of, say, Carl Nesbitt, who was in central midfield. He worked at Vauxhalls. Fantastic young Liverpool, not Liverpool FC, but Liverpool player.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt that not just in the first game, but in the second game, which was, I suppose, the most important game, because we went on to win it at Loftus Road, that was a fantastic night, one you just can never forget.
Yeah.
And it did move on, of course, to help us because of the publicity. The following game we were live on TV, and it brought in, you know, £100,000, £150,000 plus over the 2 games that a little amateur club like Vauxhalls could only dream of obviously bringing in across the gates, you know. My personal history, which I'm not sure is really relevant, was I worked in the plant. I managed the first team here, sacked myself and became chairman, and brought in another manager who went on to win the West Cheshire First Division, when it was a very, very strong league in his first season. And the rest is history. You know, we went into the North West Counties under my leadership. We won leagues unbeaten in the North West Counties, and went in eventually moving up into the Conference North. So really, really exciting times with some fantastic games, not just the Queen's Park Rangers games, but for example, Taunton Town in the quarter-final of the FA Vauxhalls.
Yeah.
Beating them 5-1 at Taunton when nobody would have given us a chance against the team that had reached the final of the FA Vauxhalls the year before, but we battered them.
Yeah.
So just great seasons, and a great season, and the FA Cup just put the seal on the year, really. Just unbelievable, you know. I'm of course not the chairman now.
Yeah.
I'm the president of the club.
Yeah.
And the people who have, you know, were invited to take over from me, and John Waring and all of them are doing, in my opinion, an absolutely fantastic job. Fantastic job, right throughout the club. And it's important that they do, because without football there wouldn't be a club, you know. I had the disappointment when I came back here, having worked in London and been away for a few years, to realise that both this club and the football club were both close to bankruptcy. And it was left, whether people liked it or not, and a lot of people didn't like it, to take them out to Conference North because you were paying stupid wages for players and by a club that couldn't afford to do it.
Yeah.
And the chances were that we were going to go bust. So we went down, but having gone down, I had and still got a vision for both the club and the football club. And we've done really well over the last 5 or 6 years. McGrath's done fantastic.
Yeah.
And I respect the man immensely. And the team has done very well, obviously. But, it can't be just about the first team. It's got to be about the growth of the whole club, and particularly the club that you're standing in now. If this club is losing money, then the football couldn't survive either. So we've got a lot of work to do. My plans are, and the club's plans are well known. A third all-weather pitch is what I'm working on at the moment. And I've got every intentions with Dave Edmonds and with the club of delivering that. And that should bring in additional revenue, albeit as a massive cost, But nevertheless, I think if we can grow our girls' teams here, grow our women's teams here, let the first team continue to at least get into what I describe as the Unibond League, because that's, where I said to the manager some years ago where I think we should go and can go. So that's the aim, top of the league at the moment, and of course today's game against Avro is going to be a crucially important step in the right direction, but I think ultimately it'll come down to the away game with Wythenshawe Town, who are clearly no mugs, and we'll see where it ultimately takes us. But from my point of view, I look at the vision of where we go. It is not just about the first team, because if I may put it bluntly, if we'd listened to where the first team was going and what it was spending and how it was being run 6 years ago, there wouldn't have been a first team, there wouldn't have been a Vauxhall Motors, they'd have been bankrupt. They'd have been bankrupt because of greedy players and foolish wages that this club couldn't afford. And of course that's history now, and we're growing again and moving up the divisions and the leagues again, and that's fantastic, But we can't make the same mistakes of the past. We've got to do what we can afford to do, not what even a manager as good as McGrath is might think he wants to do. It's got to be what we can afford to do with a club that's got to grow girls teams, women's teams, kids teams, because at the end of the day that's what the club's about.
But that moment at QPR was definitely the best moment that you've seen here.
Well, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
It was the most important game of the club's history. It's a unique and historic day, a unique and historic occasion. I remember on the night watching Ian Alloway, the manager at QPR, who of course is a famous guy, went on, I think, to manage Blackpool after that, actually, quite successfully, really. I can remember watching him almost in tears, getting battered by the press in London. And it was interesting to hear somebody talk about a little club like Vauxhall, obviously beating such a giant and well-known team with the history of being in the old Premier League. Unbelievable, incredible.